The Children's Bible. Pieces from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Garden of Gethsemane. When they had sung a hymn, they went out of the city to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all desert me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen again, I will go before you into Galilee." Peter answered and said to him, "Though everyone else may desert you, I will never desert you." Jesus said to him, "I tell you truly, that tonight, before the rooster crows, you shall deny me 3 times. But Peter said to him, "Even though I should die with you, I would never deny you." And all the disciples said likewise. Then Jesus went forth from them to a place over the brook Cedron, where there was a garden called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over yonder and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and heavy of heart. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Stay here and watch with me." He went on a little further, and fell to his face, and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, let not my will, but your will be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. Then, being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like great drops of blood falling to the ground. And he came back to the disciples, and found them asleep, and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch now, and pray that you do not fall into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away again a second time and prayed, saying, "O Father, if this cup of suffering cannot pass from me unless I drink it, your will shall be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Then he left them and went away again, and prayed a 3rd time, saying the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again. And he said to them, "Sleep on now, and take your rest. It is enough. The hour has come when the Son of Man shall be betrayed into the hands of sinners." Then he said, "Rise up, let us go. Behold, he that betrays me is at hand." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and clubs, from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a signal, saying, "Whomever I shall kiss, he is the one. Hold him fast." And with that he came to Jesus, and said, "Hail, Master!" and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and cut the high priest's servant's ear off. But Jesus said to him, "Put up your sword again in its place, for all who draw the sword shall die by the sword. Do you think that I could not now pray to my Father, and he would immediately give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the Scriptures be fulfilled, which say that it must be thus?" And he touched the man's ear and healed him. At the same time he said to the multitudes, "Have you come out as if against a thief with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you laid not a hand on me." But all this was done that the Scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. They who had arrested Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witnesses against Jesus, so that they could put him to death. But they found nothing. Although many people came to testify falsely, still they found nothing. At last 2 false witnesses came and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God, and to build it again in 3 days." The high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it that these witnesses say against you?" But Jesus held his peace. Then the high priest said to him, "I ask you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God?" Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I say to you, in the days to come you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" And they answered and said, "He deserves to die." Then they spit in his face and struck him, while others hit him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" Simon Peter, meanwhile, remained outside with the servants. And the maid at the door said to him, "Are you not one of this man's disciples?" And he said, "I am not." The servants and officers had made a fire of coals, for it was cold, and they were standing by it, warming themselves. Peter stood there also, and they said to him, "Are you not also one of his disciples?" And he denied it, and said, "I am not." Then one of the high priest's servants, and a kinsman to the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Then Peter denied again, and immediately the rooster crowed. Then the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the words of Jesus, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Then Judas, who had betrayed him, when he saw that Jesus was condemned, repented, and brought the 30 pieces of silver back to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned in that I have betrayed innocent blood." And they said, "What is that to us? That is your affair." Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple, and went out and hanged himself. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful for us to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood." They discussed it, and bought with the silver the potter's field, to bury strangers in. That is why that field has been called the field of blood until this day. When the morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people planned together against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away to the hall of judgment, and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. They themselves did not go into the judgment hall, lest they should be ceremonially defiled, for they wanted to eat the Passover supper. So Pilate came out to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not a wrongdoer, we would not have delivered him to you." Then Pilate said to them, "Take him and judge him according to your law." But the people said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put him to death." Pilate then went back into the judgment hall, and called Jesus to him, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said to him, "Are you asking this of yourself, or did others say this about me?" Pilate said, "Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have fought against my being delivered to the people. No, my kingdom is elsewhere." Then Pilate said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should testify to the truth. Everyone who is on the side of truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Then Pilate went out again to the people and said to them, "I find in him no fault at all. But you have a custom that I should release to you one prisoner at the Passover. Do you wish, therefore, that I release to you Jesus?" The chief priests and elders persuaded the people that they should ask for a notable prisoner, Barabbas, and put Jesus to death. So they all cried out, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas!" Now Barabbas was a robber and a murderer. As Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent a message to him, saying, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream concerning him." So Pilate asked them again, "Which of the two shall I release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ?" And they said, "Barabbas." So Pilate said, "What shall I do then with Jesus, that is called Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." And the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified!" So Pilate, seeing that he could not prevail on them, and that there was an uproar, took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person." Then all the people answered and said, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed, and Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released Barabbas to them, and delivered Jesus to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall, and brought him to a band of soldiers. They stripped him, and put on him a scarlet robe, and having braided a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him, and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat upon him, and struck him with their hands, and taking the reed, they struck him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off of him, and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. They took Jesus and led him away, and he, bearing his cross, went forth to a place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. And as they led him along, they laid hold on one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him, that he might carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great group of people and of women, bewailing him and lamenting him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and your children. For the days are coming, in which people shall say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, Cover us." There were also 2 others, criminals, led out with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place which is called the skull, or Golgotha, they crucified him there with the 2 criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, one to each soldier. They took his robe too. Now the robe was without seams, woven from the top down. Therefore they said among themselves, "Let us not tear it, but let us draw lots for it to see whose it shall be." This was in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, which says, "They parted my clothing among them, and for my robe they did cast lots." All these things, therefore, the soldiers did. Now close by the cross of Jesus stood his mother, and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and a disciple whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. Now people stood by watching him, and others who passed by shouted abuse at him, wagging their heads and saying, "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." And the chief priests and rulers did likewise, saying, "He saved himself. He saved others. Himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and then we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him now deliver him, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God." Now from noon until 3 in the afternoon there was darkness all over the land. And at 3 Jesus cried with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Knowing that all things were now completed, and that the Scriptures might be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I thirst." One who stood by ran and filled a sponge with vinegar. Putting it upon a lance, he gave it to him to drink, sticking it in his mouth and saying, "Let us see whether his God will come to save him." Over Jesus' head was a sign written in letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, reading, "This is the King of the Jews." And one of the criminals, who was crucified with him, scoffed at him, saying, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, seeing that you are also condemned? And we are here justly, for we receive the due return for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. The sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks split, and graves were opened. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And after this he said, It is finished, and bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Now when the captain of the guard saw the earthquake, and all those things that were done, he praised God, saying, Truly this man was the Son of God. All the people who had come to watch the spectacle, seeing the things which were done, beat upon their chests and went away. And those who knew him, and the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood afar off, watching these things. The people, that the body should not remain on the crosses on the Sabbath day, asked Pilate that he have them taken away. But when the soldiers came to Jesus, one of them, with a spear, pierced his side, and out came blood and water. When evening was come, behold, a disciple of Jesus, a rich man named Joseph of Arimathea, came secretly to Pilate, and begged for the body of Jesus. Pilate gave orders that the body be delivered, and when Joseph had taken it, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. This tomb was in a garden near the place where Jesus was crucified. And the women who had come from Galilee followed along, and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then Joseph rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and departed. But Mary Magdalene and Mary, the wife of Cleophas, stayed for a while sitting by the tomb. Then they also left, and prepared spices and ointment. They rested the following day, since it was a Sabbath. And on the Sabbath the chief priests and Pharisees went in to Pilate, and said, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was still alive, After 3 days I will rise again. Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, otherwise his disciples might come by night and steal him away, and say to the people, He has risen from the dead. And then the final deception would be worse than the first one. Pilate said to them, You may have a guard of soldiers. Go your way, and make it as secure as you can. So they went and secured the tomb, sealing the stone, and setting a guard of soldiers over it.